We're recording.
Okay, we're gonna launch tonight's meeting of the Affordable Housing Committee. John Goodwin, our chairman, resigned in December 2024. In his absence, I will act as chair for this meeting, but it's my goal to resolve our leadership issue before the end of this meeting. So hopefully we can make some progress there. We will start with the roll call. Krista Nielsen.
Here.
Hillary Ormond.
Here.
Bill Perrette is absent. He let me know. Michael Sweeney.
Here.
Maria Weingarten.
Here.
Chris Wilson, here. Jane Williams.
Here.
Jeff Williams.
Here. Here.
All right. Next item on the agenda is the minutes for the November 11th meeting. Can we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Okay, so we have Krista on the motion.
And Hillary.
Was it Hillary seconding? Yes, Hillary seconds. So the minutes of the November 11th meeting are approved. I had on the agenda an update presentation from Sarah Carey. I believe Sarah's on the Zoom call. Yeah, she is. Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
I agreed with Sarah as Krista's report, the project subcommittee report, already incorporates a lot of the information that Sarah would be presenting. I agreed to skip her presentation. Is everybody happy with that? She will remain on the line if we have any questions for her, but otherwise we will skip directly to item number 4, project subcommittee report with Krista.
Okay, thanks. When you have a moment, if you could share the presentation on the screen. So I just wanted to, given that we haven't met in a couple of months now, and even that meeting was a couple of months from our last meeting, I just wanted to kind of recap where we've been, where I think we are now, and where at least I think the project subcommittee is looking to go. But perhaps, I don't know much about what the finance committee has been doing, but you guys might want to pile on what I'm talking about as well. Okay, next slide, Bob. All right, so I believe we started our work 1 year ago this month. So we've had 8 full committee meetings in 2024. We've had 7 subcommittee meetings between both the project identification committee and the finance committee. We've spoken with 15 experts over the course of those meetings, and the names of those experts are in the box on the right. You guys, I won't read them to you. You were here, you know who they are. And we've spent some time assessing the number of affordable units that will be needed for the 2028 moratorium and beyond. And particularly our subcommittee, but I think the larger group has kind of narrowed the conversation to 2 primary approaches. As you may recall, we were previously referring to these as small ball and big ball. I'm trying to come up with some better names. So I'm now calling them town build and land bank, but that's essentially the same conversation that we've been having, just with a different name. Next slide. Sarah, this is the one that, well, you can jump in on any of them, but this is the one in particular. If I misspeak in any way, feel free to jump in and correct me. So we currently have a moratorium, a hard one moratorium, as you guys all recall. It took us a couple of tries, but it's in effect through August of 2028. In terms of a plan for 2028, I think based on everything I've heard this group talk about and Scott Hobbs talk about, I think we're pretty set in terms of how we would get to a moratorium in 2028, and I don't believe it's going to require any building. We basically have 120 carryover queue points leftover from Canaan Parish and Millport, and now that it's clear through the legislature that we can use those points, hopefully nothing changes and that remains and we can continue with that path. And so we'd have 120 carryover Hugh points, and that would require the conversion of 15 to 20 units at Riverwood, depending on the income level the housing authority chooses to go with, for a total of 30 more Hugh points, and that would get us to the 151 that we need for a moratorium. So any questions on that? Like I said, I feel like that one's straightforward. It's what happens after that that gets a little less straightforward. Okay, so for 2032, I'm making some assumptions. The first is the number of Hugh points we need for a moratorium will change based on census data, and in 2030, we will have another census. I don't know that it's going to change significantly because we are a pretty built out town, so I'm just going to roll with 151 Hugh points are needed, but note that that number might change slightly. And really what comes into play here is the acquisition of the Avalon, which is now called Riverwood, and how many more units there the town is looking to convert. And I know we've heard from Scott Hobbs on this, but I get the sense that this number is still in flux. So on the low end, if we converted 30% of Avalon, which is what a standard 830G project looks like, 30% of the units, that would get us, so we'd already have done a few of them, like I said, for 2028. We'd need to convert another 10 to 15 if we were only looking at doing 30% for 2032. Or I've even heard Scott Hobbs say we could convert all of the units and do 100% affordable housing project like next door at Canaan Parish and Millport. Either way, we aren't going to have enough Hugh points, even if we converted all of Avalon / Riverwood to get to another moratorium in 2032 without building or acquiring something else. And so that number ranges in terms of how many we would need. I mean, I think it's something from the lowest end, we'd need 15 more Hugh points all the way up to 120 to 130 Hugh points, depending on how many of the Avalon Riverwood units we use. So that's still a question, and I'll get to that more in a minute. But either way, the point is we would probably need to acquire or build something for another moratorium in 2032. And my main takeaway is that I think the acquisition of Riverwood was a very strategic and smart move on the part of the town. And I think it bought us time, but there's still more work to be done because we've got a plan for these things. And as you guys all recall from the conversations we've had, it's usually a 5 to 6 year process from inception to CO, which was going to be really hard to meet for 2028. Thankfully, we don't have to now, but we do need to start planning for 2032. Other unknowns are in the box on the right, and those are primarily the 830G projects that are still in litigation in terms of how many units may end up from those. I mean, that's a TBD kind of thing. Also, you probably have all noticed that the Burtis Street project is started construction. And that does have, I believe, 3 units in it that are affordable through our inclusionary zoning policy or regulation. So that will bring us 3 to 4.5 Hugh points, depending on whether they're rented or owned. And again, I think the income level is 80% of SMI. I don't know exactly when that's planned to be complete. I would guess it might be done before 2028. All right, so questions on this, or Sarah, anything that needs to be clarified further?
So I'll just add that something we've learned not particularly recently, probably like June of 2024, is that you can also apply for a moratorium ahead of schedule. So let's say that Riverwood converted their units over for us to get the 2032, the 2028 moratorium next December. We could apply for a moratorium then and have it rolling, ready to go. So I think that's important to somewhat keep in mind for 2032, because if we get the points, ready to go ahead of 2032, we don't have to wait a certain amount of time to be able to apply for a moratorium. So, just something else to keep in mind.
But so, Sarah, they wouldn't take effect until the current moratorium expires, though, right? It's not like you're just swapping out one moratorium to start another 4 years sooner.
That's correct. So, you have to be clear and strategic about what you're asking for, but you could in theory apply ahead of time and have it start one right after the other and truly have no lapse and no concern about there being a lapse.
I think that would be wise. Okay, if there aren't questions, we can always ask questions later. Let's go to the next slide, please. So basically the project development subcommittee has talked in our meetings about two strategies. Again, we used to call them small ball and big ball. I've given them different names here. On the left side of the slides, you have what was big ball, which is basically finding a piece of town or state-owned land to do a larger scale affordable housing project, such as we have done in the past with Canaan Parish and Millport. On the right side is the small ball approach, which I'll get into in a minute. Basically, just to recap what we've done as a subcommittee, we surveyed all of the town-owned and state-owned land, as well as privately owned parcels over 5 acres in town. We came up with a list of 6 criteria up there on the screen that they're draft. I mean, we weren't hard set on these, but that's where we started with in terms of the types of amenities we wanted the sites to be walkable to. I think being on a public sewer is a non-negotiable criteria that's up there. And like I said, we did primarily focus on town and state-owned land. And the outcome of that is the 7 sites that you see listed there at the bottom. In the parentheses after each site is sort of our straw poll vote in terms of which ones we thought were great, and they're listed in descending order. The top 3 most interesting to us being Richmond Hill, Locust Avenue, and Lumberyard. Basically, these are almost all parking lots that are owned by the town, and the thought process there was they're underutilized pieces of land in great locations that have a development potential that hasn't been tapped yet. And so I'll come back to what we do about that in a minute, but that's kind of where we have ended our work so far on the right side. On the left side, the small ball approach or the land bank approach, I think we've talked to a lot of experts, and my takeaway from the conversation is that land is a pretty difficult commodity to get your hands on in New Canaan. It's expensive. It makes affordable housing expensive in this town. And so having the town become a player in the real estate marketplace, I think would give us a lot of flexibility. And I think the acquisition of the Avalon or Riverwood really underscores that acquiring land, and in this case, units on the land, gives us options. It gives us a choice of, do we want to convert these now or do we want to convert them later? Do we want to hold this? Do we want to redevelop this? Do we want to do an RFP and flip this out to developer to build on? But the land is kind of the common denominator there. And so getting into land banking is, I think, the second strategy that we've been referring to as small ball, and I'll talk more about that in a minute as well. But that's kind of where the project development subcommittee sort of stopped, is what you see on this slide. Next slide. Oh, go ahead. You have a question?
No.
Okay. All right. So now I want to talk about where I think we go from here, and this is probably where conversation will be mostly had. So the first thing I think that the town, I'm going to say we, I don't necessarily mean we as this committee. I don't know who exactly the we is, but it's somehow the town government, whether it's the housing authority or us or the board of selectmen, I'm not sure. But somebody needs to do an analysis, and I think Scott Hobbs has done some of this, of the Riverwood property to really assess what I'm calling the Goldilocks number of units to convert to affordable. And in my mind, this is a factor of 2 different things. One of them is sort of social policy on whether doing mixed income or 100% affordable is a better match for the town and what we're attempting to do here, and also not just short term, but also long term. And then the second piece that I think is probably a little more straightforward is the finances and figuring out the maximum number of affordable units that can be supported there in order to continue to pay off whatever debt we owe on that project. To me, I'm not good at math, but that's probably the easier part of this equation to figure out. And so once we can answer these questions, then we can get back to how many units does the town actually need to acquire or build for 2032? Because answering this question will tell us how many we already have in pocket with the Avalon/Riverwood acquisition. Next slide. All right, in terms of what the project development committee did, to talk further about what I'm calling the town build scenario, and on the screen is one of the slides of kind of where we left off on this, which is a pretty high level analysis of each of these sites. We looked at zoning, we looked at the size of the sites, whether they have water and sewer, but we need somebody who's more qualified perhaps than this group of volunteers to go deeper into each of these sites and really look at the title history, the deed restrictions, the site conditions on these sites, and what opportunities or challenges they present, confirm the infrastructure availability and capacity, and then take a hard look at the development potential of each of these sites. I don't know if we go with all 7 or if we just skim the list down to the top 3 or 4, but look at the development potential under existing zoning, look at the development potential under new zoning. I don't know what that new zoning looks like, but give us a real sense of what could be built here on these sites, and what the best outcome is. Is this all affordable? Is this, again, mixed income with market rate units? What size units are we looking at? I think we would want some conceptual drawings, as you can see, if you can see that little slide on the screen. I used some free software on Google Maps to do a real boxy, I don't know if it's 2 or 3 stories there on Richmond Hill, but we need someone who's more of an architect to take that a little further than what we've done. And then also come up with some rough cost estimates for construction, which I think will be important in assessing the different opportunities the town has. Ultimately, I think these options would be presented to the public and to the town leadership. And if we wanted to take it one step further, I could see us helping in a draft RFP to find a development partner for whatever preferred site is the outcome of this. But so that's just kind of a laundry list, my laundry list of things that I think still need to be done, but as you probably hear me getting to, I think are maybe a little bit beyond our abilities. And so I think we're going to need some help. Next slide. The same is true for what we call the small ball or the land bank approach. I mean, I think in concept, this is a great idea, but there's just a lot of details to figure out in terms of criteria for the types of parcels that we would be looking for. For instance, on the way in tonight, downstairs at the entrance to Town Hall, there's a list of tax foreclosed properties. And a lot of municipalities, that's kind of the low-hanging fruit, blighted, abandoned, tax foreclosed properties. Town government sweeps those up, holds on to them, figures out what the best use is, and flips them. I don't know that there's a lot of that here in New Canaan. I'm not sure that that's our approach, but maybe looking at existing naturally occurring affordable housing in our town and really trying to buy up those properties before they flip to a developer and become, a 10,000 square foot house. Maybe that's our approach. But there's, I think, a lot of conversations to be had about what are we looking exactly to acquire and why. For instance, would we look at commercial conversions? Would we be interested in buying down units in existing multifamily buildings if we couldn't afford the whole building? Would we be interested in buying down units in newly permitted buildings that haven't been constructed yet? So I think there's a lot to delve into there. Ultimately, I could see the town having some sort of color-coded map. I mean, this is a very simplistic version of green, yellow, red, green being properties that are great opportunities if we ever get a swipe at them. Yellow meaning, maybe, but there's some issues. Red meaning it's probably never going to happen. And I would think this would be an interactive map that would change over time. Think, for instance, I don't know that the land trust has something like this, but I would imagine they might. And if they acquired, parcel A over here and parcel B over there, and there's a piece of land in the middle, well, now all of a sudden the map rearranges itself because that piece in the middle becomes a higher priority than perhaps it ever was. So I think as we continue to work, if we continue to work with this strategy, it keeps moving and changing, and we need some sort of real-time data to assist us with that. Beyond figuring out where these are, we'd need to identify an entity to perform the acquisitions. I don't know, again, if that's the town government, the housing authority, a land bank entity. We would need to identify a funding source. again, could be the land acquisition fund, it could be some other fund. We would need to figure out how we want to roll this out in terms of partnerships with real estate developer or real estate agents, whether we'd be looking to accept donations of property from landowners if they met our criteria. We would need to plan for the ownership and maintenance of these properties once they're acquired. Who's going to manage them and who decides when they're converted to affordable units. I mean, again, if this is kind of a bank, we're putting things into the bank and someone has to decide when we're taking them out. And then also determine when we're going to dispose of them and, who's eligible for that under what circumstances. So I think it's a great idea and concept, but there's a lot of details that would need to be figured out before we could really present this as a real strategy for consideration. All right, so this brings me to the last slide, which is, in summary, I think we need to ask the Board of Selectmen to help us get a consultant on board to help us further flesh through both of these strategies that I've outlined. And in addition, if we need help figuring out the Goldilocks unit situation that I talked about at Avalon Riverwood, I would throw that into the scope of work too. I'm ballparking here. I think $30,000 would be a good number to get us started. Sarah and I have looked at some things that have come across the state planners listserv in recent times, and that seems like to me a pretty reasonable number based on some other things I've seen. But anyway, that's where I see the subcommittee going from here in terms of what our needs are. But I wanted to present this to you guys tonight to open this conversation up and see if we're on the same page, because certainly we need to be on the same page.
So first I'll say, Krista, that was a really comprehensive presentation. And I very much appreciate you putting it all down in one place. Do we have any questions from the committee?
No, I think Krista has represented both what we've done and the two strategies quite well, and including the to-dos on both strategies. And the need for a consultant has come to the fore pretty quickly here.
I agree with that. And I just want to add one question, one variable into the mix among all the other variables. Has anybody talked about or assessed, taken a look, made projections on the costs of conversions at Riverwood?
So I was going to get on that after, but I'll jump in here. That's a job that the finance subcommittee is taking on. It's not something that's progressed very far. I've been very busy over the last 2 months on business stuff, but I will pick that up with Scott. I think it is a dynamic calculation. It will change a bit over time. So we'll want to create a model where we can look at it today, but also assess in, say, 2030 what it might look like as it will change slightly.
Thank you.
So that's something we should try and get for our next meeting, our February meeting. Sorry, March meeting. Any other questions, comments? Amy?
So the budget for the Board of Selectmen, we've already signed off on it. It's moved to
I know.
finance. So if you want to get a number in,
Sorry, excuse me, Amy, can you come up to the microphone? It's hard to hear for those of us in Zoom land.
Oh yeah, sorry. She can sit at the table there. That's
There.
no, what I was just saying is from the Board of Selectmen, we've already finalized our take on the budget. So to the extent that you want to make a case for funds for next year to be put in the budget, I think you probably need to go to Board of Finance at this point, because they can add to the budget or subtract. When you get to town council, they can only take away.
okay.
Okay, so just in terms of the process, and obviously we talked to the Board of Selectmen and stuff, but I know they would look for a specific number, but our part's already done, so we moved it over.
Am I correct in my understanding that contracts under 50,000 don't have to be in the budget? That Board of Selectmen can approve those kind of ad hoc?
We probably, I mean, we do have contingencies, but it's cleaner if you think it's a committee, because I think utilities, perhaps, I forget, maybe have asked for, so it's, you're there now, they're in the middle of the budget right now, so I think it'd be just cleaner to,
Do we need something from the Board of Selectmen before we go to Board of Finance, or should we just go and say, this is what we want, and they'll deal with it?
well, I don't want to speak for Deanna, but I'm sure she'd want to be in the loop.
Yeah.
Certainly, because, and I understand you want to have a specific ask for a specific purpose. Yeah. And my thing is, I've been waiting to see what it's going to cost to do the conversions, because I think people in the town have to realize it's not free.
Not
It's
free.
either a property tax abatement or we buy down some stuff. And, it's just building a big spreadsheet with variables. I don't think it's hard to do, but it gives, to the extent people can have an idea of what it will cost, almost kind of by unit to roll it over, to put a context with that, because if the market could bear it, it would. So by definition, below market rate is going to need some subsidy somewhere.
Yeah, not free. We're confident on exactly what the number is. We have to work.
Yeah, no, I know, but range is helpful.
Yes,
So-
yeah, no, I think we can get a quite specific model.
Yep. With all the
um,
variables you.
Looking
that's
at the debt and the impact of losing income.
So I don't want to speak out of term. It's just that I think if you're thinking that you need some money, this is the time to,
No, very
Talk-
helpful.
talk
And
to
thank you
selectmen.
for coming tonight.
Amy, before you leave, would this be considered a capital expense? And has the Board of Selectmen completed the capital budget yet?
yeah, well, we already signed off on all the budgets. So is that Maria
Okay.
speaking? Is that Maria?
No, it's
Yes.
Hillary. Hi,
Oh,
sorry.
Oh, Hillary, sorry. No, so Hillary, it's with, but, anything under 50,000, we don't bond anyways. So whether
Yeah.
it's capital or, it'd be, I mean, I wouldn't really consider it capital. I would think it's just operating. It's just
Okay.
not that
Yeah.
big a number.
And then, Chris, just to give you some context, there is precedent for something getting into the budget and sort of skipping the Board of Selectmen part of it. It's not ideal, obviously, but at least in my tenure, I think the first year I did the budget, we approved the extended walkways at Irwin Park. And that took a little bit of a circuitous route to us. I think it initially was, they had missed, just like Amy's saying, it had missed the Board of Selectmen part, went before the Board of Finance and then came to us. So it wasn't without scrutiny, and we definitely scrutinized that process, but there is precedent for it. So just so you know, we wouldn't be sort of doing this, the first person to do it ever.
That's
And
helpful.
Deanna obviously sits on the Board of Finance. So I mean, it's,
Yeah.
but I would just say it would be a collective discussion if that is, something you need.
Thank you.
But I think to Krista's point, there's going to be very limited amount of progress that we can make as a committee without some external expertise. So we're going to have to figure out a path.
Yeah, and
Hopefully
just a well-reasoned ask, because I think is what people need.
Any other questions, comments on the project subcommittee report?
Just
Okay.
Thank you to Krista. That was really helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Krista.
Great.
Excellent
Krista,
job.
could you circulate that?
Sure.
Great.
So I think the next item is talking about our committee objectives. I think Krista has kind of put a very clear lens on what we need to do. And I think, that should address some of the concerns that were expressed by committee members in light of John's resignation. Are there any other comments in regard to committee objectives, continued concerns? I like the silence. That's good. You nailed it, Krista.
Well, it makes for a quick meeting too.
It
Chris.
does, it does. This brings us to the next topic. So we are facing a little bit of a leadership crisis here. John, who very ably led us through the initial stages of the committee and certainly put some color on what we needed to do from my perspective, has stepped down. As I mentioned on email, I do not have the bandwidth to consider the chair role. I'm happy to continue as secretary, but I'm open to a completely new leadership if people choose that. Are there any comments on leadership suggestions in this regard?
So I'll just clarify. I think everybody knows this. I think I'm right about this, but those of us that are appointed or hold positions on other boards and commissions, such as planning and zoning or the housing authority, cannot be the chair.
Yeah, so I think the parties that are potential candidates, and correct me if I'm wrong here.
I'm just trying to narrow the list for you.
Yeah, Bill Pratt, myself, Jane Williams, Jeff Williams. Does that sound correct?
Yeah.
No,
No,
Maria's on Board of
Maria's
Finance.
on Board of Finance, yeah. So that is it's a limited roster. Any thoughts?
Do we have any indication from the Board of Selectmen whether they've identified any additional candidates to?
Yeah, so that's a good point. We are a committee of 8 at the moment. There's an open spot. That open spot could potentially be another party who would be able to chair the committee. I do not think there's any, I'm not aware of any candidates who've been put forward.
Not on spot.
Okay. If people have suggestions, I'm sure the Board of Selectmen would welcome them. Okay, if there's no thoughts at this time, we'll park it for the moment. I'm happy to be interim chair for the next meeting. But I do think this is something that, we need to bring to a head. Perhaps we should have some discussions among ourselves. I think, Krista's presentation and some of the discussion here has given us a little more form to what we need to do next. Hopefully that makes it easier for people to consider stepping up as chair. Next topic I wanted to bring up was the meeting schedule for 2025. As everybody knows, we've historically met monthly. There is no requirement that we meet monthly. Other boards and commissions meet on different schedules. It would seem to me that monthly is a little bit frequent for the time periods we're looking at right now, but I welcome anybody else's suggestions and comments. These buttons.
Yeah, I think maybe a slower pace right at this point in the interim now makes some sense. I think if we do have a consultant and we start, making some headway, then I flip back, I think, to monthly meetings.
Yeah, it would be good for us to publish a meeting schedule. That's kind of the norm. So it'd be good for us to establish a frequency for 2025 at this meeting and set it out and publish it in a notice.
I think, Sarah, if you're still on here, correct me if I'm wrong, but that we've learned in planning and zoning is that it's easier to put out an agenda or schedule with, like, let's say monthly meetings and then cancel them than it is to say, oh, we're going to meet quarterly and then whoops, we want to meet this month. It's harder to get something on the schedule. So I guess my vote would be, Sarah, is that an accurate statement?
So I mean, it's really just about like room availability. Other than that, like
Special meetings, don't they have different notice requirements? Or is
No,
that only for planning?
planning and zoning, just because of the public hearing, and since you guys don't have public hearings on a regular basis, it's not that difficult. So it's really just, is there a room available for you all?
Okay.
You think it's easier to cancel?
Amy's saying. it's
Amy's
easier to-
suggesting it's easier to cancel. So perhaps we'll keep with our monthly schedule. And no, we have not published 2025 schedule. So that's part of it. So we will put out a schedule. We'll keep it the same date convention as we've used, the second Monday of the month, if there's no objections. I'll put together that schedule and send it on to Pam for publication. Anything else on meeting scheduled? All right.
I think then we would just, maybe as acting chair, you'd ask us at the beginning of the month, do we have anything on the agenda? If there's nothing,
Yep.
cancel. If there is, meet, but kind of do it like that.
Very good. Public comments.
Can I, Chris, before we go to public comments, just quickly,
Yes.
are we anticipating trying to get before the Board of Finance during this budget cycle to propose for a
Yeah,
consultant?
I will put something together very
Okay.
quickly. I may tap Krista to help me with this. And, this week, try and get it over to Deanna first, and then, and we'll copy all the selectmen.
And I've got the schedule pulled up here, just to be aware that the Board of Finance, and Maria, you jump in, obviously, is meeting every Tuesday and Thursday for the next several weeks, and their vote is on the 6th of March.
Well, it'd be great if we get it for Thursday in front of
Yeah.
them. So I will work on that.
Okay.
I think sooner rather than later,
Well,
given we've already,
This week is good because next
Yes.
week is the kids' February break. So
yes,
you
yes.
need my help. Get it now.
All right, so I will be in touch tomorrow morning. So I'd say there's no public comments. Motion to adjourn. Okay. Michael Sweeney, second.
Looks like Hillary had her hand up.
Hillary had her hand up. Okay, Hillary Ormond. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.